Good evening again, ladies, and welcome to the official start of the second hangout for the African Women's Development Fund USA. As I said earlier, my name is Obenowa Ampamsa, and I'm really delighted to be back here in conversation with so many of you from across the continent and the diaspora today. Just a couple of quick things. I'd first and foremost like to start by, of course, acknowledging and welcoming our elder, Dr. Abina Busia, who was one of the founding members of the African Women's Development Fund, who is currently Ghana's ambassador to Brazil, who is joining us all the way from Brasilia. And you know, it's great because I can see many of your gorgeous faces on the screen, but you know, Auntie Abby, even though you're allegedly our elder, you're blending right in here, hey? You know, this thing of black don't crack, it's very, very real. So, to each and every one of you. And this evening, let me just also give us a couple of housekeeping details. If I could please ask that when you are on, when you're not speaking, if you could please go ahead and mute yourself just to minimize any background noises. And also to acknowledge that many of you are caregivers. We know that at the same time that you're on this call, you might be homeschooling, making a meal, trying to answer emails, and all of those things. So if a little face or even a big face makes an appearance on screen, no worries. We'll just happily wave at the company that comes to join you. And really, again, just to thank you and to honor you for being here and for committing this time to be in conversation with other women around the role of African women's philanthropy as we live in this era of COVID-19. I would like to invite the chairperson of the African Women's Development Fund, Mame Afong Sai, Yelbert Sai, to give us a few words of welcome and to tell us a bit about the AFWD and what brings us all here today. Over to you, Mame.
So thank you all so much. My name, as Obenowa said, my name is Mame. I am Ghanaian. And it's so funny, living in the US, I get my name called different ways. Sometimes people call me Mame, sometimes people call me Maame, but the one I love the most is when people call me Mommy. And literally, my name, Mame, means mother. And, you know, for me, my life is all about nurturing, about cultivating, about creating space, and about being in space, holding each other up, especially as women. And I think that really is what draws me to the work we do at African Women's Development Fund USA. At the who we are, we women hold the solutions in their hands. Unfortunately, because of the systems that surround us and the environments we live in, oftentimes the solutions that we hold in our hands are not able to be deployed as needed. And that has been the vision for establishing the African Women's Development Fund, so that we can mobilize the resources, we can mobilize ourselves, and we can deploy, we can activate, we can bring to the forefront the work, the contributions, the achievements that African women are bringing to the table. Because at the end of the day, all I know is that everywhere we go, we as women, and especially as African women, we hold it down. That's it. That's all I know. I know that we are always holding it down wherever we are. And so, and there are always opportunities around us. And so in this season, in this unique season that we live in, there are so many opportunities for us to connect. And this is one of the ways we believe that we can have conversations and communication around to bring those voices to the table, to amplify our voices, to sort of amplify sisterhood, and also to embrace and create containers for all of us to hold each other. So AWDF has been around for 20 years, started by 3 amazing women, Auntie BC, Auntie Hilda, and Auntie Joanna of blessed memory. And here we are today. So excited about that, and so privileged and blessed to have all of you join. I know people have a lot of things on their table, on their hands, but it is such an honor to see all these amazing faces for us to join hands. And I'll let Auntie Abby say a few words because she passed over to me as board chair. And so I always want her to speak a few words into the space as well.
Well, thank you, Mami. And thank you, Obiniwa, for the welcome. I'm always happy to be here. And I'm always happy to see the, what shall I say, the network widening and the connections widening and the work we do continuing and to meet the needs that we face in any given age. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Abigail has also been with us right from the start, who you're about to hear from next. So it's very heartwarming to see that there's still a place for us and we know how to claim. We're building the table. It's no longer that we're looking for a place at the table. We're making the table, and people can come and join us here if we want. So this is really fabulous. And so I'm happy to be here. I was writing this, but I just want you all to forgive me if I finish my lunch with some fruit and have a cup of tea. All right. Thank you.
It is allowed, Auntie Abby. And again, thank you, each and every one of you, for being here. No matter where you are in the world, finish your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, afternoon tea, whatever it might be. And as Mame, as well as Auntie Abby indicated, we're building the table. And this is really the moment where we collectively want to hear everyone's voices. And so we'll be using a variety of forms to bring each and every one of us into the conversation. If you're not familiar with Zoom, please do go ahead and take a look at your participants tab. There is a way there for you to raise your hand. You could physically raise your hand. You could type something in the chat just to go ahead and make sure that you're getting your questions and things answered. And what we'd like to do now is to invite you into small groups just so that you do have a moment to connect with one another. And there are two key things that we would really like for you to discuss in this moment. One is where you're from. I mean, just looking around at some of you that I've had the opportunity to interact with before. We have Rebecca, who I think is safe to say is our youngest member from Tanzania. Wave at the people. Rebecca, who's 16 years old, who joined us for a conversation a couple of weeks ago. So we're really happy to hear a younger person's voice in this conversation. I know that we have Chipo, who is originally from Zambia and based in South Africa. We have Yvonne Moore, who's in New York, but has done work all over the continent, particularly in Liberia. So we're very well represented here. And we'd like you to take a few moments to introduce yourselves to one another, tell us your name, where you're from, where you live now, but also to answer this really key question in your group. And that question is, how do you define African women's philanthropy? Is there something distinctive about it, or is it simply when African women engage in philanthropy in ways that we've traditionally thought about it? So we're going to give you about 10 minutes in your groups. We are going to go ahead. Nana is going to kindly put us in those groups. If you have any questions, we'll be in the main room, so you can definitely shoot us a message to ask, or we'll also be popping into the rooms just to check in with you as well over the 10 minutes.
Okay, enjoy everyone. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? I'm okay. How are you? I'm good. Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. Can you see me? Okay. I'm doing multitasking here a little bit. Let me just let one more person in. Okay. Hello.
Me okay?
Yes, I can. How are you, Dinah?
I'm fine. So my name is Dina.
Dina, okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh boy. And where are you from and where are you living now?
So I am from Uganda and currently living in Uganda.
Okay.
I work with AWDF
Okay.
Ghana, so very newly appointed as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. What's your role there?
Knowledge management specialist.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm Nana. I'm originally from Ghana. I live in New Jersey in the US, and I am currently a doctoral student doing education work. So I have an interesting background of like technology and engineering and found my way into education, but it's been fun. So welcome everyone. I see Florence and I see my friend Florence and I see Techno come on. I'm not sure who that is. Florence, you want to go next?
Yes, hi everyone.
Hello.
I'm Florence. I also live in New Jersey, as but I work for the Department of Education in New York City. I'm a program management manager there. I can't really talk. Really love to support our women, particularly African women. So I'm really excited to be part of this talk today.
Okay. There's a welcome, Florence. There is another person I can't Techno. Come on. Okay. So maybe for Dina and Florence, what does African women's philanthropy mean to you? And this is an interesting one for me to think through as well. Hi, Dina.
Hey.
I can see it's Techno. Okay. Techno, do you want to go? Just introduce yourself. I don't know if I have the name right, so. Okay. So maybe Dina, do you want to take that question? Okay.
Sorry, I muted myself.
Okay. No worries.
Yeah, it's quite. it's a moment to reflect. I think for me, African women's philanthropy goes into a lot of solidarity building.
Mm-hmm.
So broadly touching on, so beyond really finances, but thinking about the tools and assets that African women have and mobilizing those to facilitate the change that they want or the change that we're all hoping to attain. So I think for me, it's really organizing and mobilizing assets and resources to be able to, in a very connected way, address the challenges and the issues that affect African women. So really, for African women, by African women, and with African women, yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you for that. Florence?
Yeah, this is interesting because I really didn't expect to be speaking.
Well, it's just a small group of us, so
I thought I was going to be listening.
I know.
Some guest speakers, so I didn't really give this a lot of thought. But I think when I think about the topic, agency comes to mind.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
African women being able to have the agency to raise resources, gather resources, pull together to be able to support the things that are important to us. So that's what comes to mind. And I really hope that, we will get to a point where you know, we're beginning to rely on each other because there are successful African women out there, right? They're breaking different barriers and really rich women. And so how can we tap into those leaders and those resources to be able to fund missions that are close to our heart? So that's what comes to mind when I think about that topic.
Yeah. So I'll go to, I know Techno raised her hand, so let me have her speak. Can you hear us? Okay. Hi. Let me send her a. Let me just send her a quick note and see if she'll. No? Okay. So I think what's interesting to me is that this perspective of what African women do is a little different from what your traditional perspective of philanthropy is, right? Because there's a sense of like a philanthropist is somebody who goes and gives people money and sort of the poor take it kind of thing. And I think that from an African women's perspective, it's so different. Go ahead. Oh, let me unmute.
Hello.
You. Hi, can you hear us? Okay, great, thank you.
Hi, yes, I can hear. Thank you very much for giving me the floor.
Yes.
My name is Geshetu Diko. I am from Mali.
Okay.
I am very happy to be, you know, on this table discussing about African women, and we will come together to gather resources and to see in how many ways we can foster one another, and in all African countries. And I think this is such an important thing that we should all think about and see in how many strategies, like communication strategies, how to put women together and to satisfy their needs in all aspects of life. Because we do not have the same backgrounds, we don't have the same realities, the same cultures. We need to come up with something that will unite us and give us one voice that will become very powerful and will contribute to the development of Africa. Because I believe in women, and I believe that with women, Africa can go better and have a very better development. Thank you for letting me joining you. I am from Mali, and I'm listening to whatever you are saying. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I think that that's what you shared is fair in that we look, you know, if you're out in the West, there's a sense of like Africa is one big place and we're all the same. And that's not the truth. That there is something still that binds us all together that we must capitalize on. And I agree with the comments here that we have so much wealth within ourselves that we have to start sharing and kind of supporting each other more and more. And I know that there's a lot happening on the continent and in the diaspora. And I think this is a time where we also try to bridge between what's happening in the continent and what's happening in the diaspora to really form a big connection and kind of support each other and become sort of a worldwide force, because oftentimes we're kind of left alone. And I sometimes say that Africa, everyone needs Africa for their wealth and their goods and their people. Africa needs to start needing itself first. So I'll leave it at that. Okay. Any other thoughts on the line? Yeah. Okay.
I think, so it relates to what Florence raised, so the issue of agents. And I think that the other unique thing is really, so you have the of course, like you've also rightly said, so it's not homogeneous, right? So philanthropy, African women philanthropy is also the angle of so indigenous resources, coming out of communities and you know, African women-led initiatives and thoughts, and so things that are not really really financial, so like I said, so assets that they have, and these could be skills, they could be things that they've been doing over the years and they've worked. So philanthropy is, in the sense, mobilizing those. So things that we could call best practices or indigenous knowledge or initiatives. And you know, so it's, the difference is that at the end of the day, recognizing that the power lies in the hands of the women. Yeah. So what philanthropy is doing is stirring that, and you know, creating platforms, harnessing those resources and assets
Right.
to be
So
able
I'm gonna actually go back to my other role. I'm gonna close the rooms, but if you guys can please share what you just shared, I think this is a really, really helpful discussion. But I'm gonna close the rooms and everyone's gonna get a message from me. Okay. But great to talk to you and great to meet you. And good, Florence, good to hear your voice.
Yeah, the same. I logged in and then logged
Yeah.
out, so that's why I wasn't sure what was going on. So
Oh
we're
yeah,
going back to the
worries.
main
We're
room.
going back to the main room. Yeah, you have
Oh,
to probably
okay.
accept something again, but yes.
Excellent.
We're
Thank
going back
you.
to the main room, and Abigail just come back in. All
Will
right.
do. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
All right, everyone's coming back in. Welcome back.
So I hope you enjoyed your time in your small groups. I know I had a cool small group. I'm just going to put it out there. And I'm going to go around and just get some insights from the different groups. But if at the moment, while we're waiting for the rest of our colleagues to join us, if you just want to type in the chat, you know, where you're from, where you're calling from today, just so we can get a sense of our geographic reach. So just let us know in the chat where you're located, where you originally come from.
Okay, I think everyone should be back in.
Is everyone back?
Yes.
Okay, we have someone, Alicia, who's from Baltimore by way of Nigeria. I'm with you, Alicia. I grew up just outside of Baltimore, so you know I keep my stock of Old Bay with me at all times. Those from the DMV who know, you know, you know. We also, we've got another person from Nigeria also living in Baltimore. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Who else here is from the DMV? Also, Christina. Yes, see, Christina, I saw you smile at the Old Bay. You know what's up. You know what's up. Great. Someone coming in from Boston, Jersey, Sierra Leone by way of Jersey, Zambia, Cameroon, India. So quite a Pan-African international group, which is certainly very fitting for a conversation of this nature. And welcome to you, Dinah, as well from Uganda. I'd love to just hear from a couple of people. You can go ahead and raise your hand physically or just using the chat button just to let us know if you'd like to share some of the things that came out of your group around African philanthropy. And if I could also ask, if you haven't done so, if you'd please just make sure you put yourself on mute when you're not speaking, just so we can minimize background noise. Thank you. Anyone like to share what came up in their group? Chipo, please share with us. What were some of the things that came up in your group?
Sure. So I think what was really interesting about our group was talking about the way in which philanthropy, so the difference between philanthropy and charity, and also the ways in which African philanthropy needs to be specifically tailored to the needs, and just how important it is to learn from others and to work out how to give in a way that is both responsible and productive and is optimizing like the way in which resources are shared, whether that's knowledge, whether that's money, but how to kind of tap into a community so that when you do give, or when you're in an organization that has a mandate to give, the things that you're giving actually help to improve the situation.
Thank you. So that's very helpful, this idea of philanthropy versus charity. And I liked the terms you used where it's both responsible and productive, right? And that it's not just about taking wholesale solutions from elsewhere, but learning from other places, but really catering to the African context, which is certainly something that came up in my group as well. Anyone else like to share what came up in their group or any particular insights that they might have had during their time together? Justine, would you like to share with us some of what was spoken about in your group?
Tristan. Oh, because I was in the same group, so she just said what. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
It's all good. Was there anything else that you'd like to add to what Chipo had to say, or any particular questions you might have about African women's philanthropy?
I mean, I said what I could say during the group, which was, first of all, because we are kind of comparing like the philanthropy in maybe the Western world and philanthropy in Africa, and that was where we could say we cannot really compare the two continents or the two settings, because we have specific needs which we think we need to tell on our philanthropy to make sure that this whatever thing we are doing in the name of philanthropy is accepted by the society or not, and also it reaches its results, because at the end of the day you want to have a result which is positive. Yeah. Yes.
So positive and results driven once again.
Yeah.
Thank you for those inputs. And I think we'll certainly have more conversation about this, and we'll hopefully be able to leave with a common definition of what African women's philanthropy is, that isn't just a definition for the sake of a definition, but that also helps to inform all of our work, both professionally and privately, moving forward. But this evening, we are in for a special treat because, as we would say in South Africa, we have a real veteran of the struggle, someone who has been doing this work on the front lines in various spaces and places for many years, and that's of course Miss Abigail Bergensen, who is a passionate and influential advocate for women's rights. She has over 20 years of experience in the nonprofit sector on the African continent with extensive global outreach. Before joining the AWDF, Abigail worked in the area of democratic governance and social justice with the Institute of Economic Affairs, the Africa Leadership Forum, and the National Democratic Institute for International Affairs in Ghana. And I believe that we also have another alum of the NDI, Breon Dawson, who is also on the call with us today as well. So certainly that institution is well represented. The combination of Abigail's social justice philanthropy and feminist background, experience of women's rights, coupled with her international relations experience in political economy, practice in negotiations, partnership management, and democratic governance background gives her a unique and grounded ability to blend practice and theory in promoting African women's rights, women's leadership, and development. In 2008, she received the Feminist Leadership in Africa Award from the Akina Mama wa Africa Leadership Institute. And again in 2015, she represented civil society organizations in Ghana at the African Growth and Opportunity Act meeting in Gabon, having been recommended by the US State Department and the US Aid for International Development. Abigail graduated from the University of Ghana with a Bachelor of Arts in English. Any other University of Ghana alum here? Or I think this Abigail is representing herself, but she's not alone because I, like her, also went to Boston University, where she received an MA in International Relations in their European program in the UK. Abigail has also received specialist training in international negotiations from the Center for Applied Studies in International Negotiations in Geneva, Switzerland. Please join me in welcoming Abigail. And since we're all on mute, we'll just do a little like this, clapping in American Sign Language to welcome Abigail. And as Abigail is sharing her remarks with us, please do put questions in the chat and we'll certainly have an opportunity to engage and be in dialogue. Abigail, over to you.
Thank you very much, Abino. I didn't even recognize myself in all that you said, but thank you. And good afternoon to all of you, wherever you are. It's evening for some people. I'm really grateful to you for giving AWDF, and I'm not here representing myself, but having other African women and other women, diaspora, and women from different walks of life in different continents, giving AWDF an opportunity to have this conversation with us. I'm thankful to AWDF USA, the new executive that's coming up to actually tell us they are there and we've got to really feel them and feel their presence. I'm also very grateful to Prof. Buzia, and like she mentioned, it's been a long journey with AWDF. She has been with us from day one. She's been the main host for all our events. Aside of that, she's traveled the new crannies of Africa with us doing different things. She's been a great resource to AWDF too. I'm acknowledging all of you, but I just want to mention her and then Yvonne Moore, who's also done extensive work with us on the continent, and she's also one of the voices you can tap into or give a call to or reach out to if there's any other thing you want to engage in. So I'm very grateful to you all for this opportunity. We are not in normal times. We are in real different and difficult times, but then you've made this quite easy, and we are taking advantage of this opportunity. This should have happened in New York, but then yes, it's still happening, and we are grateful. So Obiniwa asking me to talk about what African philanthropy is. I think I agreed with all that was shared. There's no one definition. Everyone actually captured a bit of it. And I haven't really seen it defined by one single person in a book. From my perspective and from what we have discussed before at AWDF, I see it as philanthropy by African women, for African women, and with African women. That is being led by African women, bringing on board their experiences for starting such a philanthropic initiative. And if you should even go back to the history of AWDF, the three founders just saw that, look, African women needed resources to address their own issues, to just convene, to have a chat, to respond to their own issues. And therefore they said, why don't we come together, look for resources, and support African women? It must be driven, it must be for them, and therefore they must tell us what they want, what the issues are, issues pertaining to their contest. They know it better than us. And so for African women in philanthropy, they listen to the African women or the communities in Africa they support. Because these people understand and know their own issues, they are defining their own realities, and all this adds up. And then you cannot be a philanthropist without anyone to support. You're doing it with the people. It is not just giving, but you are part of a team. You identify your needs, you find solutions to your needs, you empower each other, you strengthen each other, you give a voice, you mobilize, you rally, you gather in people's homes. It's all part of our philanthropic justice. I always refer to some of the books, writings of Chinua Achebe and Things Fall Apart, and you gather what African philanthropy is, where your neighbor's issue is your issue. There are responses Africans give as much as it's concerned. So there's no one definition. And who are the African women philanthropists? I believe we all are. We don't define it by people owning and defining big family philanthropies or global philanthropies. Anyone at all who can step in at a time and bring a solution to an issue is considered an African woman and a philanthropist at that. So there's no one definition, but then it is based on our own perspective, our understanding, and how we listen to the people and to drive what we need as Africans. So those are the key things I'll speak to as far as that is concerned. Did anyone want to ask anything, or I could just go on and continue? So then, looking at our issue as it is now and COVID-19, what the issues are, a lot has happened the last few weeks or months. We have seen so much in terms of governments in all the African countries coming up one way or the other with issues or practices that are not normal to us in terms of prioritizing health systems, making decisions as to how we interact and interface with each other, with everything about social distancing, lockdowns, and a whole lot of things that is not actually taking into consideration the life of the ordinary African, let alone the marginalized African and the African woman, because everything about our continent and globally actually is gendered. It affects men differently from the way it affects women. And across the region, we have seen that there's been the release and growth of authoritarianism, militarism, and control over populations. We're having the army stepping in certain places, actually very abusive to citizens and all this bit as part of the lockdown measures in the region. It's not actually taking consideration of the normal lifestyles of the ordinary African in terms of we driving a daily economy, which is driven by African women mostly, cross-border trading, daily economy we call it, in terms of they must trade today to get their income for today and tomorrow. That is the kind of economy we've had. We haven't taken into consideration, our governments have not taken into consideration the social structures we have in terms of housing, planning, communities, and all that. And they are enforcing certain practices. So this has actually been an overwhelming time for all of us, like even it is in the global north. But we tend to acknowledge the fact that yes, the spread of COVID-19 is a bit slow in Africa, catching up. And our response in terms of the continent is actually a very preventive approach, because definitely we don't have the systems and structures to arrest the situation. So it's a wise and prudent way to attack it or get ahead of the virus by way of undertaking some of these measures put in place. However, within this period, we have seen philanthropy respond, and I'm talking of philanthropy from Africa. In Africa, AWDF is part of a network of women's funds, and then we also convene with the Africa funds. We have the Urgent Fund Africa. We have Women's Funds Tanzania. There's a Francophone fund in DRC and a new Francophone fund in Togo. So these funds, together with AWDF and other funders across the world that fund in Africa and all those who support us, quickly stepped in to see how this can be addressed. The first thing that came to all of us is flexibility in terms of how do our constituents, our grantees, our partners, how are they going to fare under these circumstances? They've been given grants to operate and do different kind of things. How are they embarking on it? What is it? But lo and behold, our grantees were very proactive. Most of them got to us before we even put out information, communication to them to reach out to us about their work. Some asked that they would have to terminate the work because they couldn't do it, depending on what they were doing in the communities. Some asked for their budget to be reassigned to responsive COVID-19 response programs. Some asked to work virtual with support from AWDF for equipment, laptops, and other related things to get their work done. We also had our donors, who are mostly from the global north, coming in, showing a lot of flexibility and concern, actually stepping in to ask what our grantees want, how they could help, even giving us longer time or actually extending our grant conditions in terms of when we report and other things, and keeping them informed of the developing trends, what grantees are saying and what grantees want to do with funding they have. Some grantees actually asked if they can use their grant money or if there could be another money for them to do COVID-19 specific interventions. And this is not new to us, because African women have always stepped in at such a time, irrespective of what people had described as the image or impression given about African women being at the receiving end in terms of taking the instructions or getting the hand-downs. They are always the lead in such situations. We've had issues of Ebola before on the continent. We've had other epidemic breakouts, cholera and other things. And African women have been at the helm of affairs. At the time of Ebola, we couldn't have operated without responsive African women in the affected countries, being on the ground, being very prudent with resources, knowing what to do. We just listen. The key word is to just listen, and you would be pleased you did. They have the right solutions, the approach, and even with the international partners that have landed in the Ebola affected countries, most of them actually had a real challenge of not getting to where or achieving their main goals until African women stepped in. They come in not just with the attitude of working, but they know the cultural dimensions of how to interrogate these kind of issues. You do not just go into a community and say, Ebola kills when you touch a person, don't touch your baby, don't touch this person, you cannot relate to your family members, just like we are doing now with social distancing. When you get some of these women explain how to their community members how they should handle these sort of things, you'll be amazed, because they come with a cultural lens, with their attitude, beliefs, and practices that they know. And they tap into all these to respond to the needs. And I must say, we were very happy to find out that even with the spread of COVID-19, it got rather late to Liberia and Sierra Leone, because we gathered that as of December, Liberia had closed its airport to certain flights coming into the country before any other country did. Their Ebola quarantine centers were active. If you came from certain countries, you would be quarantined for 2 weeks. We didn't know this was happening, for them to check and all that. So these are practices carried over from one impact of a pandemic to the other. And that is how humanity learns. That is how we need to learn to take things forward. And African women are a store of knowledge, a store of wisdom. Given the chance, they can give you the historical perspective of how the virus can actually mutate and affect people depending on where they are and what they're doing. But these are things that have not been tapped into. We cherish these kind of conversations with them, and they inform us. As a grant-making organization, they tell us what the developing trend is as far as the issue within their community. And therefore, when they're responding to it, you get results. These are the things that you can see, outcomes that you can really measure as being part of the work they do. And then also, as part of this, women's funds in Africa have stepped in diverse ways. Apart from giving in all the things the grantees want, the equipment they want, some of them have actually even responded to giving. Grantees have asked to intervene in the communities in terms of giving food, having the social protocols, the hygiene protocols in place. Grantees have provided that, ensure that the communities are being educated day in, day out as to the approach and all that. And we intend, as a Women's Fund, continue to engage and listen to them. AWD's immediate response actually was to map out what grantees needed. They had to tell us, and then we responded. One of the first responses actually was supported with funding from staff. We have our workplace giving that staff contribute to. A group of staff, a number of staff members actually asked deductions to be made out of their salary into a special fund to respond to certain needs. And the first went to an organization in South Africa that actually works on violence against women. And for most, I don't know whether you're aware how much violence had actually sprung in terms of COVID-19. They are working from home. South Africa is a lockdown. So they're working from home. They needed the equipment and other things to track their response organization to violence against women. So the first grant went from AWDF staff to support it. AWDF instantly had to look for flexible funding to do this. As part of our work, also, we actually liaised with a number of our grant donors who also wanted to know what was happening to support these initiatives. But one of the key things I want to mention that I would applaud my own organization for doing is to think about the psychosocial impact of these things, of what is happening. And as a result of that, next Monday, AWDF is actually having a conversation called Sister Sister with our grantees. This actually stemmed from work we do with under our governance and leadership program, which is a coaching program, and we have professional coaches that work with grantees across the continent. And in the wake of COVID-19, the coaches reached out to some of the organizations, and that is when they came out with some of the emotional trauma and other issues that are impacting on the women. People need others to talk to know that there are people on their side, they are not in the same, they are not alone. And therefore, this is the sister-to-sister conversation that has been created and led by our women, our coaches. It's actually for psychosocial support, mental health, care, and basically to give people the room to recover and feel they are in control a bit. These are some of the things that Women's Funds are stepping into. I know Urgent Action Fund Africa also has a program responsive to this sort of trauma as part of the issues going on. Now, there are lots of adjustments being made also. We instantly have to look at ways to be prudent with the funds we have, negotiate with donors, know who we are giving funding to and the kind of funding we would give. And all this stems from the fact that funding that comes to most African philanthropic organizations and African women in philanthropy are funds that are not flexible. They are funds tied to a particular need. And we are operating on a volatile continent, a continent that anything comes up at any time. One of AWDF's key principles is actually to be a responsive fund to African women, like I mentioned before. So much as we have a grant-making calendar and schedule, giving grants by a certain period, if we wake up one morning and there's a huge crisis in one country, we cannot say our grant-making period is over for the year. We've got to look at how we can step in. And you can address these sorts of issues when you have flexible funding. Funding that you can easily give to your grantee that you know they will deliver. It doesn't have to go through the normal protocols of a particular donor, but it's funding that responds to an African need. So flexible grant making has become the norm for a lot of women's funds in Africa. And for them, they are also asking the same question. There's very little we have we consider flexible. How do we come to that stage where we have funding that we do not think about twice if we have to step up to an issue on the continent?
Abigail, sorry, I think we've lost you for a moment there. Please just try unmuting yourself.
Yeah. There you go.
Thank you. How do we get a core, a cadre of individual funders across the continent and outside the continent, Africans in the diaspora, that we can speak to and boast of a number of individual givers that will respond to the needs, that would let us have money that we can easily jump to address certain issues. We do not need to come to a meeting, think of what a donor is thinking before reaching to our funder on certain issues. These are funds that we know can address things that are peculiar to the continent, that is understood by both parties. So flexible funding is one of the needs of African women who are into philanthropy on the continent, and particularly the organized institutions like AWDF, UAF Africa, Women's Funds Tanzania, the DRC Fund, and others. How can we build that? And that is what the kind of conversation we need to take forward. It is on the radar of AWDF, and the structures are being built as the next phase, moving away from our institutional, building our institutional funding. So it is a core concern for us. Our regional learnings have actually supported the work we have done all these years as a women's fund. I have talked about Ebola, we've talked about the responsiveness of women, their social engagement, their cultural influence. Actually, even in issues of conflict, Somalia, where the people organize, they've been at war for 30 years. The people who broker peace behind the scenes are women. And we've had grantees that have worked in those capacities that have moved on to be politicians in Sudan and Somalia over the years, that we had years ago, we had worked with them as refugees, and they were based in Kenya, working in Mogadishu and other parts. And later on, they became influencing people of influence in their governments, in their respective countries. This is the kind of stories we cherish. We have seen them as refugees, doing whatever they could to get their daily bread in Kenya and other parts of Africa. And these are the people who have taken all the knowledge and experience to move back to their countries to take up leadership positions. But how many of them are out there? How many of such people can we groom? Where are the resources that can trust that you build one and you build 1,000 out of one person? We need a step-down approach to some of these practices, and we believe we can thrive as a fund and as a philanthropic organization on the continent with our partner funds, with all the necessary support from partners across. And when we talk of partners, we talk about our partners in the diaspora, our sisters in the diaspora, Africans in the diaspora. We even have people who support Africa immensely in the diaspora who are not Africans, but basically they have a link. They could have been born in Africa. I met some that they were born in Africa because their parents were diplomats. And as a result of that, they have a strong link to the continent. The agenda is how do we bring these people on board? How do we tap into them? I appreciate the work of AWDF USA. I have seen the intergenerational linkage, having Professor Buzia and having the new core, and which is a very promising future, that there is a support, which Professor Buzia's presence is an endorsement and also supporting the initiative of AWDF USA as it is now. And I believe the current team would also build on a new crop of people in terms of the volunteers, the interns, the people they bring along, which together forms a kind of movement in the diaspora. You create a kind of partnership that you need. You create a core team of people who can infiltrate different communities, organizations to help mobilize resources for your own work within the region and for the work in Africa. We've also had applications from the global north, people reaching out to us, looking for funding to support initiatives in the global north. And most of them are actually issues that deal with social and emotional and psychosocial issues, actually, and these are things that I think one of our first funders, Sakina Mamawa Africa, started doing in the UK. So much as you looking at harnessing resources and expertise and other things to support us, there's also a lot that comes your way, that comes to us one way or the other. It is not about us in Africa alone. And I'm actually emphasizing that because one of the questions I get when we speak about our work all the time is, do we fund African women in the diaspora? We support African women in the diaspora. We do not have our own funding, I mentioned. None of our funders endorses us giving money to the global north. But we believe an organization like AWDF is the organization that can tap into our networks in the global north and then have their initiative to support the work we do in the diaspora towards African women. Who are the people, the experts you have within your community you identify on mental health for women, care, and other related things. Even women wanting to transit and the issues presented to migrants in developing countries. So once you identify these roles, we are working on the continent, but we are working together. AWDF USA has been very instrumental connecting us to people every now and then who come back actually asking how they could be of help. There are numerous ways you can be of help. And we talk, funding is not the only bit. Professor Buzia in our cluster talked about capacity building. Capacity building is core. Our grantees do not thrive only on our funding. We believe in equipping them to enable them access other kind of support and funding. And therefore capacity building is matched with AWDF's grant giving. We have a well-developed and strengthened capacity building organization team. And it is that team that is leading the issue on the sister-to-sister conversation because they actually work with the organizations at that level. We have organizations which, yeah.
One quick, I think this is actually, some of what you are talking about is actually a great segue into some of the things that, we were sharing as we were preparing around, the diaspora perspective. And so I don't know, I don't know if you have, if you are seeing any questions coming in as Abigail has been talking. I know we also, our time is kind of running out and we want to be able to make sure that we have.
This was the last point anyway.
Yeah. We have people being able to connect in there. So Abigail, I don't know if you want to finish that last point quickly.
Basically that is the last point. Okay. It is actually support from where you are in the diaspora, from any other country, the flexible funding that you can get. One person knows the other. We have the 501c status, AWDF USA 501c status that organizations can donate to, individuals can donate to. AWDF USA will do the due diligence. Introductions to are appreciated, where you lead to introduce us to particular funders that are willing to support. And like I said, we want to have a proud number of African women as individual givers to AWDF. This would actually address specific initiatives that we need to respond to, particularly emergency response funding to us. So on that note, I would be open for questions and contributions.
Thank you very much for that very in-depth overview, Abigail, and really for all of the work that you and your colleagues have been doing, both in the midst of this COVID crisis and really for many, many years before it. I'd like to go ahead and open the floor, and I do see two questions coming through, but want to just draw, if I could, a couple of themes. And please, colleagues, do go ahead and put your questions in the chat, or else you can raise your hand and we'll make sure that we call upon you. But based on your presentation, what I'm hearing really are three sort of themes. The first is that African women's philanthropy is both effective and very responsive, that it's producing its results, that people are drawing on the learnings from cholera, from Ebola, from other issues, really to be able to move forward in terms of COVID and other areas. So the gap doesn't seem to be around effectiveness. That seems to be well under control. The gap, though, seems to be around two areas. One is the ability to have a crisis fund where you can rapidly respond to different issues. And I think if there's one thing that COVID has taught us, and really SARS before that, Middle East respiratory disease, Ebola, it's not, if there will be another pandemic, it is when there will be another pandemic. And so whether it's a health pandemic or something else, how do you build the coalitions and the funding really to help you enable African women to continue to do their work? And then the third area, and it seems like this is what's perhaps most relevant for this group, is around partnership. And it seems like you're saying that there are three key areas of partnership. The first is around capacity building and what can we bring to the table to support some of the organizations that you are already working with. The second is around introductions to other entities in order to be able to expand the AWDF's footprint and network. And it's important to know that AWDF isn't just about serving African women on the continent, but also in the diaspora. And you've already had some of those requests from Europe and North America. But then thirdly, looking at funding. What does it mean to be an individual donor and to help to support some of this work? So it seems like those are sort of the three large buckets in which you have addressed us today. And to that end, there are a couple of conversations that are happening. Christine in particular has a question about how can grassroots organizations become members of the AWDF? And I think, Abigail, you can answer that, or perhaps Mame, just in terms of what can people do to get involved at the grassroots level? But also, how is it that African women can give is a question that came through earlier. And this was a question from Florence when she asked, how can AWDF increase fundraising efforts amongst African women in the diaspora? And while we're directing this to the AWDF, if others of you have experience, ideas, or best practices, please do bring those to the table as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I'll respond to the issue of the grassroots. First of all, AWDF is an organization, a grant-making organization. We raise funds and giving grants. So, and we have partners in terms of our grantee partners, our donors, and other things. So it is not necessarily or really a membership organization for people to join. But it's important to point out that about 70% of our grantees are small to medium-sized organizations. Grassroots organizations, and Professor Buzia will recall our small grants program. That was one of the first programs that responds to community-based women's groups organizations. And these are the organizations that they had a different criteria for applying. They didn't have to, now things have changed, I must say. They didn't have to go through with the bank statements and all that. We had to see their work, and we believed they were doing things and we could prove, and there were community people who could prove. However, without our own resources and going by all the issues that have risen over the years with monitoring and evaluations and one thing after the other requested by our international institutional donors, that has also shifted. But then we still have a large number of small groups that we fund. So they are already part of our constituency of grantees. And all they need is to get online to apply. And they can also place a call, check on the number, find out how they can be helped if there's any gray area they need to be guided. One of the things too that you can support with is if you know of communities, organizations within your communities, another kind of philanthropy is actually to sit with them to help them do their proposal and other things. It's one of the big gaps that we see. And due to the level of education and exposure and other things, organizations tend to have a bit of a challenge. So if you have an organization of this nature, please take your time with them and then help them go through the application process online and then apply.
Yeah.
The other bit has to do with
just a question for you there, Abigail, on that point, because I think what we're wanting to get into here are the practicalities of what people can leave this call and begin to do. In terms of AWDF, let's say someone did want to volunteer, whether it was around supporting people with applications, whether it was around the psychosocial support, we might have people with that capacity in the group. Does AWDF have a volunteer platform or a listing or way to engage people so that you're able to connect them with where the needs are? Is there something like that to date, or is that something that might perhaps be in the works?
I think that is one of the things that needs to come up. What actually pertains currently, the people tend to reach out to the grants team and share their thoughts with them, or to do a draft proposal and ask, is this the right? Even with me, people write a check with me. Have I met the conditions? Is this what is requested of this question? And therefore I pass it on to the grants team to check and then give them a response. So the team actually offers that support, but then it is good to have a cadre of a group of volunteers who can actually reach out to organizations. One of our needed areas is actually our work in the Francophone countries, where we need a lot of these supports, you know, for the grantees coming from the Francophone countries. But it's a clever thing you just brought up to have actually volunteers who would do that. And probably it's one of those things that AWDF USA2 could actually consider if there are people out there with that kind of expertise and training.
Excellent, thank
that
you.
Would be helpful.
And I think you raised an important point. I was just going to say, I think you also raised an important point around the language barrier that many of your grantees would also encounter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the last bit had to do with people with expertise. I think I would actually extend an invitation to Yvonne Moore. She's done extensive work, and I'm sure she'll be able to assist and guide us with people, individuals, or organizations that have got the expertise in building individual donor funds and other related support.
So, Obiniwa, I wanted us to, I think there was a second question. I think I want us to focus a little bit on that around the diaspora and how we can support African women and girls in the diaspora. And just to speak briefly to that, you know, what we have seen at AWDF USA is that there is a huge misconception around what it means to be an African woman in the diaspora. I think that based on the paradigms that have existed before around giving and philanthropy and international development, people, it's always been, yeah, those from the global north are giving to the global south. And even when you engage other organizations that are supposed to fund, you go as AWDF USA and you share and you say, hey, we are working with African women in the diaspora. The first response, and almost everybody tells you, oh, we prioritize support to African women who are in the global south, as if you are an African woman and somehow you find yourself in the US or in the UK or in the diaspora, all of a sudden that changes who you are as an African woman, you know. But that the fact that you are in a different place as an African doesn't change anything about you. In fact, what that does is it adds other elements, complications to how you show up, because you have to adapt within the different environment. And I have seen so many times myself, having living in the diaspora, where opportunities for leadership trainings, if there are conferences you have to go, that's always a requirement to say, oh, it's only for women who are on the continent. And so you are seeing that there is an under support like women in the diaspora are under-supported. And I think what we are seeing at AWDF USA is that we need to start shifting that conversation. We need to start bringing awareness and even education around the fact that if you're an African woman who finds herself in the diaspora, there are so many other elements added to what you are already living with as an African woman, as a Black woman, right? And so there needs to be a spotlight that is really intentional, that is deliberate, that is flexible. So all the things that Abigail was sharing about: flexible, deliberate, intentional, proactive, and of course, building a movement of individual givers where we put our money where our mouth is and all of that. It's so critical to really start to raise visibility around African women in the diaspora and this kind of support that needs to go to them. And so I think that the big thing that we are sitting with at AWDF USA, what we are seeing is that especially on the psychosocial impact, it is huge, huge, huge. And we need the resources. We need to shift the paradigms, first of all, and reframe and talk differently about how we support African women and girls in the diaspora, and then really build the bridge, right? Bridge the gap that exists between the continent and the diaspora in terms of how we move forward as a collective, vibrant movement.
Great, thank you. And I think you raised very good points. So this question of identity, not just being limited where you're geographically located, but being about the things that you take with you in your experiences. And I'd really like to hear from other people, just in terms of you being in the diaspora or even, on the continent, but outside of your country of origin. What have your experiences been with trying to access different types of support and with trying to be engaged with work in the philanthropic space? So I'd really like to hear that from people on the floor. Again, if you have a comment to make, feel free to physically raise your hand, use the chat, or else use the hand raising function under participants. And Rosemary, you're saying that you really echo this point. Rosemary, if I could just invite you to share a little bit from your own experience about what really resonates with you about what Mame is saying. Rosemary, are you there? Rosemary, are you still with us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, in short words, I don't want to take so much time, but I do echo what Mama is saying in terms of, because you're an African in the diaspora, you tend not to get support, and you really haven't changed your core. You're still so African in who you are and what you do and how you think. You were raised and grew up in Africa, and that's your home. It will never change. So the fact that you're in diaspora doesn't change you or shouldn't limit you to any of the resources from my home country. If anything, I'd like to tap into those resources. Given the fact that I'm in the diaspora, of course, I am more. I have a leg up in the sense that I have better perspective, and I can take what I have learned in the diaspora and come back to Africa and apply it with the support and the resources that I need.
Mm-hmm. And Rosemary, may I ask where you're from and where you're living now?
I'm in Atlanta and I'm from Kenya.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that basically, the cultural hurdles that still exist, having to navigate a new system as an immigrant exists in Atlanta, but even though you want to bring that global perspective back to Kenya, you don't necessarily have the support to do that. Yeah, am I hearing you correctly?
Absolutely, you got it.
Okay, so I'm going to come to Moyato, and then I see you, Auntie Abby. I'll come to you just now. Over to you, Moyato. Thank you, Rosemary, for that contribution.
Thank you, Benoit, and thanks to everybody for your contribution. Thank you so much, Abigail, for the insights that you've shared, and Benoit for just gracefully having this dialogue. I just wanted to comment on a few things. I think the first thing is this idea of human capacity and volunteers, and how we should really take a different perspective and a look at diaspora and how critical diaspora is beyond giving, but also kind of harping on this idea of capacity. as AWDF USA in the past, we've been able to send fellows who were part of the organization to go to AWDF and do some volunteer work, whether it's in the form of some type of an internship, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, Auntie Abby can also speak a little bit to this. So I think there's definitely the potential for that model to grow and for AWDF USA to really engage partners who are potentially interested in that type of support as well. Because I think there's a lot of support that can go and vice versa. Just this learning that has been happening between both of us, AWDF USA and our mothership, AWDF. I think the other thing that's really critical to understand, and I think very important to say, is that there is a lot of fluidity in our experience as African women. And what I find a lot of times in philanthropy is a lot of philanthropic partners always will kind of box us in. Well, if you're in diaspora, your experience is different. If you're in Africa, your experience is different. Absolutely, there are certain times that contextually the experience is different, but what we are finding is there is a continuous movement of African women back and forth from the continent to diaspora. There's so many African women in the diaspora who have organizations. I'm one of them. I've had my organization in Sierra Leone for the last 8 years. And yes, we've definitely faced some of those challenges with funders, etc. But we've also had funders who in Sierra Leone who are extremely interested in the work that we're doing and want to come on board, private sector, etc. So I think it's a matter of having a joint collaborative effort and being really able to communicate, okay, where are the gaps and then who can fill what gap. And I definitely want to harp on the fact that there is a lot of value that is still being, that's not being tapped into when it comes to diaspora and African women in the diaspora and given, and also just African women's issues in the diaspora as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Moyatu. And I think your sentiments around the fluidity of African women's experiences certainly speaks to what Abigail was saying earlier about the need for African women's philanthropy to be flexible, because there's no one single story, and it's something that's got to be changing and adapting in real time while still being productive and accountable. So thank you very much for that, Moyatu. And then over to you, Auntie Abby.
All right, thank you very much. This is a wonderful conversation. I'll try and be brief in my remarks, because they untangle some of the things we've been saying about African women in the diaspora and African women on our home continent. And you know, Moyatu just touched on it. I think part of what we wrestle with is that we live in worlds in which those worlds are seen as contradictory, whereas we experience them as a continuum. You know, I am not a different woman when I'm in Ghana than when I am in New Brunswick, New Jersey. My experiences are on a spectrum, but overcoming that mindset, even amongst other Africans who are with us in the diaspora, is really difficult and can have very deep consequences. I don't want to dwell on it, but I remember, for example, all those almost 20 years of working on Women Writing Africa. Mm. In that volume, my personal work, whether it's poetry or autoethnographic essays or anything like that, is not in any of those volumes. I'm in those volumes as a researcher and a translator and everything else. But there was a decision taken that because I was working out of Rutgers University, I was not a Ghanaian.
Interesting.
It was a bitter battle. And in the end, I let it go under the rug, as it were. And we made another policy decision that nobody who was editor would have their creative works in the volume. So we sidestepped the issue. And the Ghanaian committee were quite rightly very upset. But it was an issue. I was traveling at the time on a US passport, which I've since given up. But even at levels of funding like that, You know, we're working on a project with continental African women. I was acceptable as an editor and so on, but I was working out of the global north, so I could not be included as African, which takes me to the question of resources. And it's a very tricky one, because I remember, for instance, AWDF's primary mandate is continental African women's organizations, period. And from day one, we've had to wrestle with this issue of, therefore, what do you do about those of us who've got organizations abroad, or etc. I mean, I was very glad that Abigail has pointed out there are different ways of resourcing. We can network, we can, make connections, etc., etc., etc. So it's an issue, though, about resources. And how do you deal with the fact that we're an organization concerned about resource mobilization for continental Africa? But at the same time, we have to deal with the reality that those resources in the West are not available to us as African women because of institutional racism, because of classification, because of all kinds of things. I mean, you know, as an African person living in the United States, you can't apply for a Fulbright. You can apply for a Fulbright if you're living in Africa. But if you are not a green card, if you're not a citizen, there are certain, so you fall between cracks all the time. And it has to do with how to make decisions about resource mobilization. And this is a classic case of where, you know, intersectionality comes really into play, because institutionally, there is no space for Black bodies in certain contexts if they are not, you have to be A or B, you can't be both. But it's not a simple situation. And I think what Abigail said about supporting each other through networking and so on. But I think the two key things, we need to find better ways of negotiating are the fact that we live in a continuum where people do not see the continuity of our experiences and the reality of the ways in which resources are raised. And we need to be able to deal with those. That's what but I think we are finding the way, but it's always, you know, all the women are Black, all the men are Black, all the women are white, but some of us are brave, and we are brave, you know, and we are the brave, and we have to continually, because the world in which we are structured has assumed certain things about us that we are trying to overcome.
Yes. Thank you very much for that, Auntie Abby. And I think, you know, again, you're quite right. And I really appreciate this language of contradiction versus continuum. And it seems like as we think about what African women's philanthropy is, what it should be, who it should serve, and how, it is really about constantly engaging this continuum and even in many ways helping to define it. So thank you very much for that. And for those of you who are not familiar with the book, All the Men Are Black, All of the Women Are White, Some of Us Are Brave. It's an excellent piece of feminist scholarship and literature from the 1970s that I think is actually quite relevant to the discussion that we're having today. So thank you for the literary reference as well. We would expect nothing else coming to your classroom. But we are winding down on time. And so I would really appreciate if there's anyone else who would like to make a comment. Please do not be shy. This is the moment to raise your hand before we begin to head off. Or if there's a burning question that you would like to discuss, please do let us know. And because we're not such a huge group, what I'm just going to do is quickly go around as you appear on my screen and just give you a moment to say a word or two. We'd love to hear your lovely voice if you haven't spoken. So we will start with you, Vivian. If we could just check in and know if you have any questions, comments, things that you would like to leave with the group before we round out our time together. Anything from you, Vivian?
Sure. Sorry, I've been a little bit in and out because of the sound, but I think one of the things that stuck with me from our conversation in the small groups was really just the push around understanding the power in African women philanthropy. So sometimes we kind of think that our contributions as women, or even historic contributions that we've seen women make to philanthropy, which is any sort of giving that expands and giving that is productive. We often sort of trivialize that and just see that as part of our culture, or see that as, you know, just doing good and our duty. But it is in fact philanthropy. And I think we need to start using that word because it comes with a power, I think, that we sometimes exclude African women from and try to sort of use in other contexts. So I think that's powerful, and I thank you for sort of bringing that up in this.
Thank you very much, Vivian. I think that's a very apt point, and we will also go ahead and say goodbye to Irma Lee, who is heading off. And much like Ajwa, who is in New York, a doctor on the front line, and Abigail, also an alum of University of Ghana. So you all are all well represented. Thank you for joining us, Irma. I'd like to hear from you, Funlayo, if you have anything that you'd like to add to the conversation very quickly. And if not, you can also just go ahead and type pass in the chat. It's not by force.
Hi, you know, this has been a really great discussion, and many things kind of are staying with me and kind of percolating in my mind. Sorry, my kids they have their online classes, so I have to keep escaping. But what stands out to me is the uniqueness of the African woman's lens when it comes to thinking about philanthropy, because we're most likely going to be looking at the people we're opening doors for as people who could be our aunts, our sisters, our cousins. And so we would be looking at philanthropy as a way of opening a door to bring more people in, more so than a charity, you know, stay where you are, here's a couple of dollars, but it's like, come up here. You can do better, and you need to open doors for more people. So.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that contribution. And, you know, as things percolate, we want to remind you to go ahead and tweet at AWDFUSA, drop an email to let us know your ongoing thoughts and things that you are considering. And with that, I'm going to come over to Brianne. Do you have anything to share with us? Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Obenoa. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can, thanks.
Excellent. Well, this has been a really fascinating discussion, and I have so many thoughts, but one that sticks with me from the small group discussion was the idea that at this moment, we are all feeling the weight of responsibility and the importance of stewardship at this critical time. And I think just for myself, who do I personally want to be in this pandemic? And then what does that mean in terms of who I need to be in community with others that are both at the forefront or in the diaspora of responding to this collective crisis? And I think there are a lot of ways that this moment gives us an opportunity to recreate the image of the world that we want to see on the other side of this crisis. And one of the things that I love about the conversations that we've been having here is that we're talking about building our collective capacity to negotiate for the world that we would like to see. And it's about accessing resources, reinforcing partnerships, learning from the experiences that we've had, and drawing on those experiences to deliver resources in ways that maybe reflect new paradigms and that are different than the ways that we may have engaged in the past. And I think what's unique about this moment is that the West is really capitulating in its own response to addressing the needs of people in their own countries. And so it's unlike what we saw in, say, the Ebola crisis, where I would argue the West was also late to respond, but had a little bit more flexibility in the ways in which the West was sort of able to mobilize resources to support a response. So I think it behooves us to be thinking about what does that mean in terms of how we can incentivize people to contribute in ways that we might not have seen in the past. And I think maybe not for this conversation, but something that I will continue to reflect on as I think about the very valuable insights and the contributions that these erudite women that you've brought together on this call is really how do we think about sort of leveraging our existing partnerships, but also new ways of approaching the solutions to the problems that are pressing now, but also those that are going to come as we are in the morning of this crisis, I think. And until we have a vaccine, it's going to be a really, we've got a marathon ahead of us. And so it means we need to be resilient in the ways that we approach our solutions to these problems, and also flexible and nimble, and working together to be responsive to the challenges that are going to come.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Brianna, and thank you for that language around this is the morning of this crisis and that we've got a very long way to go. So ladies, just due to time and the fact that it is 33 past, I do want to go ahead and let us go, but I also want to honor the fact that not everyone has spoken. So if you do have a burning issue, please just toss up your hand. Going once, going twice. Okay, we're going to come to, we'll come to Nana and then to Rebecca.
We can have Rebecca go and I'll close out.
Okay.
Okay, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. So I'm not very familiar about African women philanthropies, but what this conversation has highlighted is that philanthropy in my country is very male-dominated. And it's clearly seen during this coronavirus pandemic because most big industries and companies are owned by men. So you can see that the men are donating charities to the government, and there are very few women who do that. That's all.
Thank you very much for that. And just thinking about, again, one of the things that makes African women's philanthropy distinctive, we might not get to lead the corporations, but what are still the ways that we're showing up for each other? So thank you for bringing that to the table, Rebecca, and being with us again. I just want to leave us, for my part, with a quote from Audre Lorde, which I think speaks to what Brianna was saying. And Audre Lorde wrote that we are making history whether we actively involve ourselves in it or not. I urge each one of you to examine how you can use whoever you are in the service of what you say you believe. And I think fundamentally that's what we've discussed today, and that's really the essence of African women's philanthropy. So that is all from me. Thank you again for the opportunity to be in conversation. I'd like to hand over to Moyatu, who I believe has a couple of announcements to make, and then Mame and Auntie Abby will close us out formally.
Thank you so much. I just had two really quick announcements to make. The first is we are currently recruiting for fellows within the African Women's Development Fund USA. If you are interested, you can definitely send us an email, and then we'll share more with you about that. We're recruiting for fellows and just interns who can come on board and really support and push our mission forward. The second thing is we are, in the spirit of African women's philanthropy, we have been running our 10 for 1,000 campaign. It is a campaign to highlight 1,000 stories in different ways of African women, both diaspora and continental. And this requires giving, right? Giving to be able to really amplify stories, do the work, and really get some amazing quality stories at this time, especially during the COVID-19 period, where we're really looking to highlight how women are dealing with COVID-19, how women are responding to COVID-19. And we have 3 layers of support. We have our Echo Her support, which is giving a gift of $10 and amplifying the story of one woman. We have our Magnify support, which is giving a gift of $50 and amplifying the stories of 5 women. And we have our Amplify level, which is giving a gift of $100 and amplifying the stories of 10 women. So if you go to our website at www.awdfus.com, you'll get the opportunity to learn more about it, and you can actually donate and give a gift then and there. We also have a WhatsApp group for anyone who is interested in the AfriWomen community, which is our community that gathers the AfriWomen Hangouts. We will make sure that we share that when we send out our Eventbrite. Thank you to everybody. So thank you all for coming once again. Thanks, Obenoa.
I just, before we go to Mommy, I just had a quick one for, and kind of piggybacking on what Moyati was just saying, is that as I listen to this conversation today, one thing that strikes me is that how do we innovate post-COVID-19? And a key piece of that is, and going back to what Rebecca said, Fulayo had said, Brion has said, and everybody, is how can we innovate in this time to get ready for what happens next? And I think a critical piece is how do we own our own story and share our own story? There is technology now today that allows us to do that. And there's so many stories and there's so much information to share. I think it's critical that we share, and not just from a diaspora perspective or continental perspective, but both perspectives as well. So and maybe it's a call for everyone to join our Amplify Her campaign and also share your stories through that. And let us share our own stories to the world. I'll pass on to Mami.
Unmute myself. I mean, I don't think I have much to say except to say we're already doing this work. What has been missing is how we unsilence the voices. That's already working, and how we bring to the fore what has been done, and how we reinforce partnerships and collaborations to make these things even bigger, right? To amplify that. And so I think where we are sitting is amplify, 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 amplify. So that's all I have to say. And to say thank you to everybody for the time spent with us. And I know there's going to be more conversations coming up, so be on the lookout. And I don't know if Auntie Abby wants to add something briefly before we...
I'll be very brief. I actually just sent Rebecca a private message because I am so happy to see her among us. So on the case of Amplify, let's see if at the time we have our next conversation, each one of us over 35 can get somebody under 25 to be on the call. Because Rebecca's been with us twice now, and she's very quiet, but each time she's spoken, she said something important. I'm going to see if I can do that. You know, get somebody under 25 to be on the call.
Yeah.
You know, that's amplification. Let's see if we can do it, you know.
But for those who may not know, Rebecca is 16 years old and she's joining us from Tanzania. Our first call when she said, "Hi, my name is Rebecca and I'm 60." Well, we all went, what, who, what?
Awesome.
So it's definitely, I mean, it's mind blowing for me where I sit. Just having your voice, Rebecca, tells me it's just the visibility. It tells me that what we have been building the right foundation. And we are doing it well, and we just need to amplify. That's it.
Yes.
So thank you.
Good people, on that, please be on the lookout for additional news, and many blessings to you as you go about this day. Really just wishing you good health, safety, and sanity in this moment that we find ourselves. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Vivian, for joining in. I really, really appreciate it. It's good to see you, Vivian.
Yes. Thank you, Abigail.
Thanks, Abigail.
Yes. All right. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.